Hi there, welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra, and I'm so glad you're here. My first project was inspired by some Pinterest wooden bowls. You can see the wooden bowls off to the side there, but the first thing I'm going to do is just take these bases that I had created for different candlesticks, and I'm going to paint them black. I wanted to have a little bit of a pedestal look for these bowls, so I'm just going to go ahead and give these a couple of coats of black paint. While I wait for them to dry, I'm going to clean up these bowls and then also give them a little bit of a new life. I found these wooden bowls at the thrift store, and they're not the cheapy ones. These are actually some really nice hand-turned, probably, wooden bowls, and they were 3 of them, and I got them for $2.99 for the set. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a little bit of this espresso acrylic paint. I did try to use some antiquing wax just to deepen them up a little bit, but that really didn't work. It made no difference at all. So I'm just going to put a very light coat on, making sure that you can still see some of the wood grain through. As you can see here, the rims of these bowls are really used. It looks like they might have even gone through the dishwasher possibly, but these are just super old. I couldn't even see what the maker was on the bottom of them, so they wouldn't be worth anything to resell. That's why I decided to do something with them and make them look gorgeous. I'm going to be attaching these together first with some wood glue right in the center and then a little bit of hot glue around the outside, so the hot glue will keep the bowl in place until the wood glue has a chance to set. These pedestals were just something that I created out of those wood signs that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I glued 2 pieces together and then added another piece on top, and that just kind of made a candlestick base. This is beautiful. I just absolutely love how these turned out, and I hope you love them too. I'd like to take a quick moment and thank all of my current subscribers. I really appreciate your support. If you're new to my channel and you like what you see so far, I'd love it if you could hit that red button too. For this last bowl, it was really in rough shape, as you can see here, and I knew that adding the brown wouldn't make a difference, so I decided to paint this one white. I'm just using my DIY chalk paint, and I tried a talc. This is a newer talc that I've tried. I have it listed down in my description box way at the bottom with the chalk paint recipe. What I usually do with this talc is I add about 3 tablespoons to about 750 mils, or say 3 to 4 cups of paint. I put it in a jar, I mix it up really well, and it turns into this beautiful chalk paint. I'm reusing one of my spindles from a different project that I just took apart, and I am going to leave the wood at the top of the spindle bare because it's always better to glue the same surface to each other, so wood to wood. And what I'm going to do for this wood round that is stained a little bit is I'm going to leave a little bit of the wood showing on the inside, and that will just give a better bond with the glues. This is just a wood round that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to go ahead and give it a couple of coats of white chalk paint too. I'm going to use the same glue combination, the wood glue in the center, the hot glue around it, glue on the candlestick or the spindle first, and then I'll be adding the bowl on top of the spindle. Now that everything's completely dry and solid, I'm going to just take my sandpaper and distress the edges of the rim, so the outer rim and that inside rim a little bit. And I'm also going to do the bottom pedestal piece, but not the spindle. I don't want the spindle to have any marks in it. And I think this project turned out beautiful as well. It was also Pinterest inspired. For my third project, I'm using this old melamine shelf that I've had in my house in my basement for a really long time. It's even got one of those old brackets on it still. So I'm just going to remove the bracket and give it a good cleaning. Where the screw holes were, this melamine always gives a really good bump. So I'm just taking my sandpaper and I'm going to just make that nice and smooth. And in the one corner there, you can see that some of the melamine is actually coming up, and that's just something that's glued on. So I'm going to just remove that little corner and then sand that down smooth as well. It's funny to me how something looks white, but then when you add some white paint to it or you put it next to something else that you think is white, it turns a different color. So there's so many shades of white out there. It's just really interesting to me. I'm going to give this 2 coats of my white chalk paint. Again, this is the DIY chalk paint that I'm using, and I'm going to let it dry completely in between. I'm going to make sure I get all of the edges and make this as new as possible. I used my Cricut and some blue vinyl that I got on clearance to create a stencil. I don't like to use my good vinyl for this, and I find that the Cricut stencil vinyl is a little on the expensive side. So I'm always on the lookout for some vinyl that's on clearance. It doesn't matter what color it is, because once I'm done with the stencil, it just goes in the trash. I will have this stencil, both pieces of it, available on my Etsy shop. It'll be ready to go. It'll come on the transfer tape and it will be weeded the way it needs to be. And all you'll need to do is stick it onto your project and then pull off the transfer tape like I just did, and then go ahead and use your stencil brush or a makeup sponge like I like to use and get your project stenciled. So this will be really something. I found this quote on the Kirkland's website. They had it engraved into a wood board, and I thought it was just a beautiful sentiment. I decided to use some dark gray chalk paint, and that's because the handles that I'm using are kind of a brushed silver or nickel, if you want to call it that, and I thought it would just go much nicer. So look at how nicely this peels right off my project, and it's not even taking up any of my DIY chalk paint. I'm so excited that I finally found a paint that's not going to pull up when I'm stenciling. You can see here that I am using my weeding tool to help me get some of the letters off, and of course the vinyl that's still in the center of the letters. So if you don't have a Cricut but you decide that you'd like to get this stencil, no worries. The Dollar Tree carries their $1.25 or something like that, their little weeding tool in the section where they have their vinyl as well. So you'll be able to get one really inexpensively to be able to do this project. When I'm putting handles on trays, I always struggle with the placement of where I need to drill the holes for the screws. So I decided this time to be a little smarter, and I took a little piece of masking tape and one of these poking tools from the Dollar Tree, put it on, poked the hole through, and then simply just laid it onto my tray where I needed it to be. And this turned out perfectly. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier on, but I did measure out the distance of where I wanted the handles to be. So I did put a little pencil mark there and the tape fit right on top. I used a wood drill bit that was a little bit larger than the screw that I was going to use, and it turned out great. The other reason I like to put some masking tape on top of things when I'm drilling is that prevents the wood around it from getting kind of chopped up. So it really makes a difference when you use the tape. So it's double duty. I've added both of the screws that I need to have in for the handle, and I'm going to just place them very gently right on top of the screw, and then I'll just use my screwdriver, just a hand screwdriver, because I don't want this to go too crazy with my drill. I'm going to start it just by hand and then use the hand screwdriver to tighten it up. I like to use ratchet screwdrivers because you can switch the little gizmo on the top and it will just ratchet so your hand doesn't have to twist that hard, especially for people who have issues with their hands like me. This works really, really well. I did give the bottom of the tray a couple of coats of white chalk paint as well, just to make sure that it looks nice and fresh. And now I'm just going to be adding these little felt pieces. I don't want to put any legs on this tray. I want it to just sit nice and flat on the table. And this will just help to prevent scratching. For a final touch, I'm taking the makeup sponge again, just with a little bit of paint on it, and I'm going to go along the edges of the tray. I just think this makes it look a little bit more distressed and aged, and because of the material that this is, I can't go ahead and sand it, so I'm just going to do this instead, and I really love how this one turned out. Let me know what you think of this tray. Before we get started on the next project, I wanted to give you a quick overview of my Etsy shop. I started an Etsy shop a few years ago and I just recently reopened it because I wanted to be able to provide you with some craft kits. I've got some Christmas still, I have some spring and some words, and I'm always going to be adding things to it. I want to show you some of my more recent ones. These are so cute with the little wheelbarrow. This one says Easter blessings, and this one says Hello Spring. These are all the components that you will get with the craft kit. So just click on it and you'll be able to take a look at what you get with this. The wheelbarrow, everything that you need to create this sweet little sign. I've created this background. You don't have to use this, but it is included with the kit. And it makes a really sweet little addition to your spring decor. This is my newest craft kit. It's a windmill. It has the base, the ladder portion, and then of course the windmill itself. I'll be painting these black, the base and the ladder part, but the top of the windmill itself is going to be sort of a galvanized look. But you can do whatever you want when you get these craft kits delivered right to your home. I'll have the link for my Etsy shop down in my description box. And I would love to know if you like my kits, if you think they would be fun to paint with and decorate your home with, and if you have any ideas for some craft kits, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear them. I picked up this stool from the thrift store for $6.99 and it's really old. You can tell it needs some love. So the first thing I'm going to do is just remove the top of it. It just is being held together by 4 screws. So really easy to take apart. I cleaned the wood really well. I actually used a Lysol wipe and then I dried it, let it sit for a little bit, and then I decided to use my DIY chalk paint to paint it white. This was what inspired me from some of the Pinterest pictures that I saw. I love the white. But I was disappointed. As I was painting this and it started to dry, I had some of the bleeding come through from this original color because it's just so old. So it was turning very yellow. I wanted to quickly show you the cute little turntable that I found at the thrift store. It's perfect for painting items like this when you just need to spin it around real quick. I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell, but you can see here a little bit that it's starting to yellow. So I've changed tactics. Once the white paint was dry, I decided to go in with the same charcoal paint that I used on the stencil in my last project. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of coats. Now it's time to get rid of this fabric that is on the stool. I'm using this little tool. I don't know what it's called, but it works perfectly for staples. You can see how easily it grabs them and just pulls them out. So I'm going to continue to remove this top layer of fabric. So wouldn't you know, this has already been covered once before. This was the original. It is an embroidery piece. It's very pretty, but it's old and it kind of stinks a little bit, so I'm not going to be keeping this. This was put together with little upholstery tacks, so I'm going to need my screwdriver just to pop them up a little bit so I can pull it out of the wood. Once I got everything removed, the board was so old and it was splintering where all the staples and the nails had been in. So I just ended up taking another small piece of plywood and cutting out a square to fit the same size. I didn't have any quilt batting or any pillow stuffing available, so I just went downstairs to my family room where I've got a gazillion dollar store blankets, and I grabbed this little one that is gray. It was $4, and I'm not sad that I'm cutting this one up. I think it's going to be the perfect addition to this little stool. I'm going to cut out 4 different layers. 3 of them are going to be the same size as the wood, and then one will be a little bit bigger, about an inch or so longer all the way around the edges. To make things a little bit easier to work with, I'm just going to put a very small amount of hot glue in between all of the blanket or felt pieces, because this is kind of a felt blanket. And that will just help to keep everything in place while I'm working with it. I've got all 3 of the pieces glued together, and this 4th piece is the one that I cut a little bit larger. I wanted to do that so you wouldn't have any sharp edges on the corners of the wood. What I'm going to do now is take my staple gun and just pull up the fabric in the centers all the way around, and then I'll continue to staple things together. Doing the corners is always a little bit tricky, especially when you don't have enough fabric. I probably should have cut a little bit of a larger border around, but I made it work. So I'm just folding things in. I kind of just start at the side and then fold up a little bit. You can see here that I don't have enough fabric on this one. I'll take care of that later. This larger one here, you can see, just press it down, fold it over a couple of times, and then give it a couple of staples to hold it in place. I will be cutting off any of the excess too. Here's what it looks like. I think it's turning out pretty good so far. What I'm going to do now is add the fabric. This is some gray ticking stripe fabric that I got at the fabric store just after Christmas, and I just love this. So I'm doing the right side down because, of course, that's what you need to do. And what I did was cut about 2 to 3 inches of extra fabric because I wanted to make sure I had enough to work with. I also want to fold it in a little bit, as you can see me doing here, a little bit of a hem, because that will make the bottom look a lot neater. Again, I'm just going to start by doing the center of this one, and then I'll just pull it ever so slightly, make sure that my lines are nice and straight along the edges, and then add some more staples. It's really easy to stretch this a little bit too far, but because this is a stripe, I want to make sure that I don't stretch it too much, then the stripes won't be straight. Then I'll check every once in a while to make sure that I don't have it too stretched and that I'm going to cut off any of the excess felt so it's not so bulky in the corner. And then I'll do the same technique. Fold it up, fold it over a couple of times, and staple it in place. For any of the excess, I'll just trim that off with my scissors. I laid the bottom of the stool right on top of the cushion, and I'm using this crochet hook with a little bit of black paint just to go through the hole to mark where the screw is going to go, because I need to trim that fabric or cut a hole in that fabric to make sure that the screw can go all the way through really well. I wasn't sure how else to do this. This is something I came up with. If you have some ideas of what else I could have done, please let me know down in the comments. I ended up just using my craft knife to just cut a little slit right where the little black dot was. I'm using the same screws that were in there originally, and they are flathead screws. They're really hard to work with, and I don't like using that, but I wasn't going to mess with the original. So what I'm doing here is, again, just hand turning them in with my ratchet screwdriver, making sure that they're nice and snug. Next time you're at the thrift store, check out some of the stools and see if they would be good as a beginner project to get you started reupholstering some furniture. If it's got a whole bunch of different screws underneath it, pass on it. But for this one, it had just the 4 screws, and that is a super easy beginner project. I hope you like how this stool turned out. I hope you enjoyed my inspired trash to treasure projects today and got some inspiration to do some of your own home decor too. Please remember to hit that like button. It gets me noticed more on YouTube and helps my channel grow. Don't forget about that red subscribe button and the notification bell. Bye for now.